Hi and welcome. Let's try this time to do things with less small talk and go straight to the point. My name is Ilan and I'm a native Hebrew speaker. We are in the fourth verse of Genesis 1. Here is the verse in the original. It is kind of long, but the good news is that there are 4 words that appeared in the previous verses. If you've been with me in past episodes, you should at least faintly recognize them. Can you try finding the words we have already discussed? If you need a few seconds, you might want to just pause the video now. Anyway, here are the words we've encountered, highlighted. So the verse in Hebrew sounds like this. VaYar Elohim et haor ki tov. ויבדל אלוהים בין האור ובין החושך. As always, let's go over each individual Hebrew word and see what insights we can gain. But before we do that, I would like to reiterate that this channel is not about religious meanings. The first word is the verb, similarly to some of the previous verses. This certainly can be an odd concept because English almost always places the subject in front. Anyway, this word sounds VaYar. It indeed translates as saw, and this is reflected in virtually all English versions. But what you can see in the translation is that VaYar is basically irregular. This irregularity is created using a mechanism that is sort of similar to the G dropping in English, where, for example, instead of seeing, it sounds sin. The difference, however, is that in Hebrew, the shortening doesn't make the verb into a friendlier informal variant of the standard, but actually makes it much more biblical. The normal form is yir'eh, which is actually longer. Yar versus Yir'eh. Both versions are used in the Tanakh or Old Testament. As an example of the standard version, in 1 Samuel 17:42, Goliath looked at youthful David, and the verb used is Yir'eh, the standard. Yir'eh is also the verb used in modern Hebrew. For example, Hu Yir'eh oto. He will see him in just a few seconds. To recap, God saw the light, but the description of that action of seeing in Hebrew is more biblical, stylistically speaking. Another thing to note is that VaYar never occurs in the Bible as a standalone unit, but only with the converting vav attached, or VaYar, which naturally brings us back to the converting vav we talked about in the last video. This is a letter that serves here as the conjunction and in English, but also as a converter from the future tense to the past tense. This is, for all intents and purposes, a unique feature of Hebrew in the Bible and makes yar, a verb in the future, into VaYar, which is in the past. The second word is Elohim, meaning God. This is the first of the 4 words we have already discussed in past videos. The next word is the second we've come across before, et. As we've talked about in the video about Genesis 1:1, this is a word that exists only in Hebrew and that seems not to serve any real purpose, grammatically wise. There are 2 other words in the Bible that are spelled the same, with aleph and tav, or the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. One of them even sounds the same, et, and is presumed to mean plowshare. In modern Hebrew, et is the word for a shovel. It's difficult to demonstrate that this word indeed spells aleph tav, since all its instances in the Bible have suffixes and or prefixes attached. For example, in Isaiah 2:4, this is the main word et, as opposed to the prefix for to or into and the suffix for the plural. More common is the word at, which also spells aleph and tav, but sounds a bit different. At is the pronoun you, but when addressing a single female individual. So you can call your daughter worried and ask her, Eifo at, Where are you? This pronoun appears several dozen times in the Bible. For example, in Genesis 12:11, in a quote of Abraham when talking to his wife Sarah. Next comes ha'or. The word or means light, and it has already appeared in the last verse. But here it comes with the letter he, which serves as a prefix for the definitive article the in English. So we have covered 3 out of 4 familiar words already. The next word is a new one, ki, which normally means because. For example, this is the meaning of ki in the very next chapter in verses 3, 5, 17, and 23. Because is the meaning in many, many other places in the Bible. Here, however, ki has another use as the conjunction that. This is just one of several meanings of ki in the Bible. My best analogy is the word set in English, which has a range of diverse uses. Attached to ki with a Hebrew hyphen is tov, which means good. So combining the 2 last words gives us ki tov, or that good in English words. We will further discuss ki, tov, and ki tov in the future. But what I want to do now is look at the sentence as a whole, because it can show us more about how biblical writing works. You see, the verses so far were very ordinary in terms of their structure, other than switching between the verb and the subject, and sometimes using the converting vav. When it comes to syntax or word order, those are just run-of-the-mill sentences, if you will. Genesis 1:4, however, is the first that further deviates from the standard. Thankfully, this is a rather mild deviation, so it can be a good introduction to this characteristic of Hebrew in the Bible, where at times non-standard is, in a sense, the standard. This flexible writing is one of the features that make Hebrew in the Tanakh or Old Testament so beautiful, but at the same time can be quite difficult for those who try to learn reading it, especially in the books of the prophets, Psalms, and some other parts. It's a good thing we started our journey in Genesis because it's one of the most readable in the Bible. Let's look closer and see what it's all about. The beginning of the sentence largely follows the regular structure. VaYar Elohim et ha'or. In ordinary speech or writing, we'll probably say Elohim ra'a et ha'or, which is basically similar to the original other than switching the verb and the subject. The verb is also changed to the standard past tense. If we want to also say that the light was good, or and God saw that the light was good, and do it in the way ordinary sentences are constructed, we'll have to change the original verse. We would drop the et because it doesn't fit here anymore. Then we relocate the word ki to be in front of ha'or, and to top it off, we would change places between the verb and the subject and turn the verb to be standard. Only then we get something that is aligned with how most Hebrew sentences are put together. Elohim ra'a ki ha'or tov. And this is also in line with how many English translations are constructed. Only that the verse is not like that. It has a special structure. The reason for the unconventional order here is, in all likelihood, to be able to use ki tov, or that good, as one unit, which later repeats itself in this chapter. We've completed reading the first sentence of the verse. VaYar Elohim et ha'or ki tov. Normally, I would tend to stop here not to overwhelm you, but because the second sentence contains a few words that might be familiar, let's just move to the next part and do the entire verse in one go. The next word is VaYavdel. Again, this is a verb in the future tense with a converter. Here too, this is an irregular variant. The normal form is Yavdil. But what is VaYavdel anyway? You see, there are two main translations into English, separated and divided. You can divide something without separating it, like dividing land into plots while the land itself is not physically separated. This is made even slightly more complicated when considering that the modern word Hevdel, which has the same root as the word in our verse, means difference. So we say in Israel, Ein Hevdel, there is no difference. The verb Yavdil, which we've just talked about and is the standard form of Yavdel, means to notice the difference in the modern language. I went over the relevant places in the Bible and found that VaYavdel can mean any of the three: to differentiate or to distinguish, to divide, and to separate. But given that the same word appears just a few verses from here in the next paragraph with the clear meaning of to separate, this can serve as an indication that the translation in Genesis 1:4 should also be to separate. Next, again, is Elohim, God. The 9th and 11th words of the verse are almost identical, bein. This means between. In Hebrew, we often use the structure in this verse, between and between. This form is actually quite helpful when you have a list of items divided into two groups. For example, if you're being told, please separate between the red, blue, and green shirts and put them in two piles. Do the blue shirts go into the pile together with the red or the green? In Hebrew, we would say separate between the red and blue and between the green shirts. Handy, thanks to the Hebrew in the Bible. And in terms of the translation, it likely should be, and God separated between the light and between the darkness. The two other words are or and choshech, the words for light and darkness, respectively. Again, we covered those before. Choshech is the fourth and last word we came across before. And here you have it, verse 4 of Genesis chapter 1. Let's read it again in Hebrew. VaYar Elohim et haor ki tov, VaYavdel Elohim ben haor uben hachoshech. We are approaching the end of the first day of the creation, so please be with me in my next video. I would really appreciate it if you could consider becoming a member. As of making this episode, if I get support from enough of you, this will allow me to outsource some tasks like editing, so future installments will be rolled out more frequently, which is something a few of you have asked for, and I would really love to deliver. You can become a member by pressing the join button below and selecting a membership option. Currently, there's one. Some small perks are involved. There is also a Patreon page, and the link is in the description. Please like, leave a comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.